Hi guys, and welcome to today's episode of thinQtalks. We've been very fortunate to have a great lineup of individuals here to join us today on a topic of sustainability and wellness and what that possibly means to each one of them and the different industries that they come from. Thank you guys so much for obviously taking the time out to be here. Just a quick intro for everybody. First up, we have Atish Chhabria, co-founder of Uactiv, one of the fast-growing early stage wellness companies in this Indian ecosystem. They've been building their own IP while simultaneously creating a community of individuals that not only empower other communities to be fitter, live a more healthy life, but also be a lot more sustainable in the process simultaneously. Next up, we have Sanvar Oberoi. Sanvar is a co-founder at Bombay Hemp company, who have now been collaborating with CSIR as the first ever medical license, the first ever license to study the medicinal properties of hemp and cannabis in India. Thank you so much, apart from obviously all the other things that you've done. Thank you so much for bringing this to the limelight of the Indian diaspora. Sanvar himself has obviously been an Ashoka Fellow and an Inc. and a Rajiv Circle Fellow as well. And I'm sure that he'll bring a lot to the conversation today. Last up, we have Arjun Vaidya. Arjun has been in the process of re-energizing and reinventing Ayurveda in the modern Indian diaspora again. Going from international relations and a double degree at Brown to now being a 6th generation Vaidya and running Dr. Vaidyas. I think they've been, again, at the forefront of the Ayurveda revolution that we're seeing in the Indian context. And once again, guys, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
So what we wanted to start with right at the outset is perhaps a question that has been on all of our minds as well while we were chatting before this. Is wellness a fad?
So fad is a strong word, but the way I like to put it is that wellness today, if you had to look at it in the Indian ecosystem specifically, is definitely aspirational driven. So it's not necessarily the in thing to do, but because you see your friends or your family getting into this whole cycle of wanting to live a healthier lifestyle or wanting to be more physically active, a lot of the times that aspiration tends to come from social media, and a lot of the times that aspiration comes from your influencers like your Bollywood stars. So they're in the gym, they're lifting, they're putting up photos of their big muscles, of cold pressed juices, of healthy products they're consuming. So I feel like that's definitely sort of started this tornado of people wanting to do this because they're seeing it all over. They're seeing it all around them, and the aspiration to be fitter, to be healthier, is something that's important because that's what eventually snowballs into you taking the lifestyle seriously. And I feel like it's something that's here to stay. So, and that's the reason I don't want to call it a fad. So fads is something that's in fashion and it's out of fashion. The only reason I wouldn't call this a fad is because it's here to stay. So it's in fashion, but it's here to stay.
But do you think then, as an extension of that, this is only for the urban tier 1 city class of people?
I think when you talk about resource availability, that's definitely more concentrated in your urban areas. And I guess that also has to do with the education of the urban population, right? So today, if you look at a cosmopolitan city like Bombay, you have a significant amount of people, who are obviously in the millennial sort of bracket, who, probably, who work corporate jobs, who have traveled the world, who have good exposure, right? And what they've been able to pick up is the whole education that comes along with being fit or being engaged in wellness. And I feel like that part of the population is, of course, very concentrated in the urban areas. But I see like a very simple trickle-down effect from here to your tier 2 or your tier 3 cities. And, when you talk about infrastructure with relation to sport and fitness specifically, right? That's something that has far more reach in the tier 2 and tier 3 cities because that's where they have a better capacity and more land and availability to build this infrastructure. But yeah, I feel like starting off, it's more concentrated in the urban areas, and hopefully it'll trickle down into the tier 2 and the tier 3.
So the millennial phenomena is going to penetrate to the billion?
Yes, the millennial phenomena, like you said it, I think is the whole driving force behind this, firstly. Of course, when you look at millennial populations, right? So, for example, if I come from a tier 2 or a tier 3 city and I'm looking to get a decent education, or if I want a good job, the first place I will go to is a cosmopolitan city. And if I have the mindset of returning to my hometown, wherever that may be, hopefully I can take back that knowledge with me. So that becomes part of the trickle-down effect. Hopefully, we're a country with 1.5 billion people. So even if 1% penetration happens, that's a significant amount of people. So
Sanvar, what has your struggles been whilst you evangelize this space? Do you see it this way?
Well, I do partially agree with him. I do partially disagree with him as well. I mean, just even on the topic that Pranav had brought up is the fact that I think I might be stretching it a bit, but if I correlate this to sort of life expectancy at large, I mean, over generations, over decades or centuries, it's increased year on year. And in fact, they project that we could potentially be 150 or 200 as well. I mean, with enough technologies, and if Alphabet has it, possibly their way. But anyway, so I see that as it's a natural human instinct in a way to take care of yourself, no doubt. But yes, where I do agree is I think the options and the opportunities now exist so much more, and what all to adopt or not to adopt to make that happen, and to be able to even get to know yourself so much better. On the cutting edge, where there's sort of gut bacteria testing and biome and those kind of companies coming in as well, it's tremendous the amount you can know, and then you can make corrective dietary and lifestyle changes to be able to sort of be more cognizant of that. Yes, but that's only as of now available to a very small % of even urban and not the masses yet. But yeah, and in terms of our challenges, I think that, and I just have to mention this because this is exactly related to what we're doing, but on this topic, one of the biggest sort of inspirations for what we decided to quit our consulting jobs and start this was because we were in Uttarakhand in a rural village, and we saw local women take hemp seeds and then crush it with a stone crusher in a tier, I don't even know if it's tier 3 town, it could possibly be a large village in that technicality. But they took local seeds and they crushed it and they get an oil and apply it to their sides to prevent stretch marks, and they eat it for strength. While they have no clue that in London, New York, it's like one of the hottest sort of food sort of trends now, which is hemp seeds and chia seeds and flax. They have no clue of that, but they just know traditionally passed down generation after generation knowledge. So it's, in a way, it's almost as if we were backwards, that it's the rural who inspired us, and they have access to it in urban.
So I was going to jump in and say there's two things that we keep talking about. One is what we maybe a phenomenon is the access information gap and the access awareness gap, right? In the wellness space, for example, it's the access awareness of what that could actually do for you. But on the other side, there's awareness of, hey, you know what, there's so much going on outside of this, but perhaps I'm not aware of that. But so from talking of generations and passing down the ability to create modern medicine through generation, have you seen a change? Obviously growing up with your grandfather and seeing what was going on there, and then now jumping back to it, how have you seen that shift?
So I think kind of going off of what they said, touching on the first question that you had, whether wellness is a fad, whether it's a kind of urban phenomenon, I'll say a few things. Firstly, what I kind of regret is that my grandfather was a doctor from 1957. His father moved to Bombay in 1923, and they've been practicing Ayurveda for years, and so has my family, 150 years in Ayurveda. But Ayurveda has never been an alternative medicine, and wellness in this country has never been as sexy as it is today. And my grandfather passed away in 2013, just before kind of Modi came into power, just before Patanjali kind of came to the fore. And so unfortunately for him, he did not see how sexy Ayurveda is today. My dad keeps joking and says, I spent 35 years, I built pretty reasonable jewelry and watch business. Nobody cares about what I'm doing because everyone's saying, hey, what's your son doing with Ayurveda? But growing up, none of us thought what he was doing was cool and sexy and the thing to do. And just going off what Sanvar said as well, with hemp, which is one example. I think another example is haldi. Turmeric is the biggest rage in the United States, and they have turmeric lattes and all of that. But what is turmeric? what is drumstick? What is moringa? And we've had this conversation many times, right? And just on being, on the part of wellness being a fad, I think there's two things, right? One is it's here to stay, and we're seeing things around us in social media and we want to ape the Bollywood stars and we want to have that body. But the other thing is also that as individuals today, we have a very fast-paced lifestyle. Social media, our work, our aspirations, our ambitions, what we see people in other countries doing is taking a toll on our bodies and on our minds. And that's another reason why wellness has become an important part to be a part of your lifestyle. And the last point, is it an urban phenomenon? I think that if you take the Western paradigm or the Western definition of wellness, which is gyms and which is boot camps and all of that, that's definitely largely urban in this country. But when I track our sales and our orders online, I find it shocking to see that a hangover product is being sold in Kerala and in small villages in Kerala and in Imphal and in parts of Kashmir where even FedEx and it's a question of what you say is wellness. And if you kind of broaden the definition outside of the Western paradigm, I think we have a lot going on in the smaller parts of the country as well.
So there is this perception of wellness and there's this perception of health and fitness. And I think there are two forces, like you all said, coming. One is this outward force coming inward, which is the social, push towards social economic push, And the other one is India's native advantage, like it's fundamentally there, that we have it. And that is perhaps.
Take the Akhada, for example, right? That person has been in that village and been exceptionally fit as compared to us for generations now.
Absolutely. And if you look at, so in the Akhada they practice this, this type of wrestling called Kushti. Kushti today, which comes obviously from rural areas, today it's like a hot selling thing for everyone wanting to get fit, Look at Kalaria Pattu. I mean, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly and I apologize if I'm not, but that is a South Indian martial art that has been practiced for thousands of years. And today, because, you have a Tiger Shroff doing it in his films and so on and so forth, people are picking it up in urban areas. They're starting to do it. But again, that's something that comes from.
Do you think we are learning this well from the West, like which is branding and positioning, like yoga, right? Which has perhaps been a generational, something we've inherited from our forefathers. And that is coming to the forefront today as the next in thing as a form of fitness. Are we learning from the West?
I mean, unbelievably, right? So I gave a talk yesterday to some Schwartzman scholars and I was pulling up yoga data just to kind of put where yoga is in comparison to Ayurveda and some astounding stats. So there were 20 million people in the US practicing yoga in 2012. That number is 37 million in 2016. $10 billion worth of yoga merchandise was sold in 2012. We've sold $16 billion of yoga merchandise in 2016. Just in this small time period, this is the increase. 34% of people who were surveyed said they would practice yoga in the next 12 months, which means that in a short period of time, you'll have 100 million Americans practicing yoga and spending an average of $15,000 a year on yoga. Because what have they done? Tiger Shroff. With what Sanvar was saying as well, what was in a village in Uttarakhand today has been made sexy, and that's the objective and that's the idea, right? The West has taken yoga, made it appealing and accessible with yoga mats, yoga apparel, yoga gyms, and you can practice it today in a very simple form. So it's really about taking what we have as traditional history and traditional legacy and traditional knowledge and packaging it in 21st century.
But then how much of the real yoga is lost in translation perhaps? How much of it is lost in it being more a social phenomena as opposed to an actual health and wellness phenomena?
So I just want to come there, and it's interesting because there's a friend, he's another young fellow, Sarvesh, he runs Zorba, which is a sort of a set of different, and I think what his USP, and I had a very interesting conversation on exactly this topic with him, because I think what they're trying to do is really a modernized yoga in a sense, where they have sort of aqua yoga, and then there's a whole bunch of, there's no end to that. And I was actually having a conversation on the same question with him, and then he said that he agrees in a way that some of the sort of salient aspects do get lost in that translation, but he says there's a cost benefit sort of to that, because by modernizing it, you do at least now being able to get it to a lot more sort of audiences who will adopt it in this format than who would have not at all. And so be it.
And how better to champion it through the individual with the most reach in the country to begin with. The Prime Minister of the country, for example, has been championing yoga. Patanjali and Baba Ramdev have been championing yoga. And as a result of it, I don't know whether it's a trickle-down effect like we spoke of, but that makes us sometimes question of, in this space, how important is perception that the information has to be a top to bottom trickle down rather than a bottom up adoption of what's going on. How important is that, do you think?
But theoretically, we can say that is that the right thing? Is it right to take what was 2,500 year old and some people say, like bastardize it or change it or ruin it, etc. All of that. But you have to come down to the reality as really what works. Our objective is, and my company's objective is to take Ayurveda to the world. Yoga has been taken from us by the West, repackaged and sold back to us. And today, we are not even a minuscule size of yoga as is the US. Right? When I was growing up, and I grew up with chronic asthma, my grandfather forced me to do yoga when I was 5 years old. It was the most uncool thing. We had this old teacher come to my house as a 5-year-old, make me blow into a straw, and it was really uncool. I went to Brown in 2009, and was like, you're Indian, you know yoga, right? And I was like, I don't really know much about yoga. And so I was learning yoga from my Dutch friend at Brown, and I think that and as India, we need to, and it's great that this government is doing it. We have a Ministry of Ayush. We just need to grab what we have and say, look, we are Indians. We are going to take it to the world. We have a lot of value. We have a lot of knowledge. We need to be able to sell that knowledge to the world.
If you look at few yoga concepts, right? So there's something in the West that's very popular. It's called hot yoga, right? Bikram's yoga.
I wouldn't take his name after what's been going on with him lately, but
well, conceptually hot yoga, right? Taken off in how? In California. You have, all the top models doing it. You have some of the, the most prominent athletes who are starting to take up, these classes. And, eventually that's sort of led to Bikram yoga being spread all over the US, and eventually hot yoga as a concept coming to India. Same thing with beer yoga. Now this is something that me and Arjun have collaborated on together. So there's this concept called beer yoga, which predominantly exists obviously in beer land, Germany. And we had heard about it, and we were like, hey, why not bring this type of concept to India? And, we decided to do an event together. And the whole idea of bringing beer yoga was that how do we get yoga as an art form, as an exercise form, as a medium to mental well-being, if you want, how do you get it to the audience, to the millennials, or to people who haven't practiced? Yeah, exactly, who haven't practiced this art form before. And I feel like, again, that's sort of coming off of what he said. Repackaging is very important, and a lot of the times we've taken inspiration from the West in order to repackage our own legacy. But again, I think it's important for us to look at it from a more, practical perspective.
So that's when the question comes around as perhaps individuals in the trenches, in this larger space. What is the general perception of entrepreneurs in this space been like? You guys have all had different journeys, obviously, over a period of time. How has bias or perception from different stakeholders in this, whether it be government, whether it be investors, whether it be other entrepreneurs, whether it be farmers, whether it be customers in tier 2, tier 3, right? How was it to begin with? And B, do you think it's changed, and for the better or worse?
I think that at least we've just finished 5 years, and then we've, I can safely say that the last sort of, the entire time period, we always thought that the perception would be our single biggest challenge for us, given that we're working in cannabis, and we're in our 20s. We would have those certain sort of roadblocks along the way, which somebody maybe when they're 60 would try to go in, or 50 something, try to go into government meetings or investor meetings would possibly not face. But I'm very pleasantly surprised that how sort of welcoming it is. The good part is, at least in my case, out of all the different stakeholders you name, I think the one I have to credit the most is the bureaucrats in this country, at least what we've experienced. Technocrats, bureaucrats particularly, because one good thing is that when they grow up in UP, they grow up in Uttarakhand, Himachal, or the North Indian states, they've grown up with cannabis basically growing on their backyards. And not to their fault or not to their wrong intention, it just naturally grows. And then they're aware of it. They eat bhang ki chutney as just any other sort of food item. And so we've seen that, because now when we talk to sort of senior peoples in government, they have that kind of background. They don't just think of it as sort of a Bob Marley or just as a sort of recreational drug, or that causes more crime to increase and things of that sort. And I think that in that case, seeing sort of their level of confidence and acceptance from their side has sort of translated across the investors investor community as well as customers as well. There are, I mean, not to say that that's all sort of hunky-dory, there are sort of fine-tuning needed, but more or less, I'd sense that in a way, us doing this in India is a lot easier than if I had to do this from scratch, in a country where they do not have a cannabis background altogether. So at least in my case, that's been.
So what I found really interesting in between what both of you said, and I'm going to bring Arjun in on that simultaneously, is on ground in areas where people are, for example, using product and are perhaps coming from in northern and northeast areas and sort of that belt of the country where cannabis, which is perhaps a stigma in a city like Bombay, is not there, and individuals in the bureaucracy that we speak of are actually a lot more accepting of it. So the challenge that somebody like they faced actually was to do not with bureaucrats, but on the other side of it. Whereas when you look at, for example, doing an event in tier 1, it's the bureaucracy that didn't play their part because it was logistically perhaps not as feasible, but the corporates and the investors and the this and the that on that end perhaps are a lot more flexible. How has it been like for you? Is that the same in this space, do you feel?
So, just give you an anecdote to start the conversation and then get into something more deep. So, early December, I went to Dubai to exhibit my product, my first expo outside of India. Because the focus is moving towards taking Ayurveda to the world as well, right? And every time you go to immigration in Bombay and you're going for a holiday or one of those, I'm going to Europe for holiday, I'm going to the US for holiday, you are told to speak as little to the officer as possible, right? Because he's going to ask you questions, why are you going, what are you going for, whatever. So he asked me, why are you going to Dubai? And I had these letters saying I'm carrying product, etc., all of that. So I said, I'm going for an Ayurveda expo. I'm going for a health and organic products expo and I'm exhibiting Ayurveda there. And he gave me a high five and he said, Jao, desh ka naam bada wahan. So that's a change which we've not seen in India for a long time. But I think for the three of us and for a lot of us young entrepreneurs today, we are trying to break the glass ceiling and do things that haven't been done before, right? So I'm taking Ayurveda to gyms, I'm taking Ayurveda to marathons, I'm taking Ayurveda to bars, I'm taking Ayurveda to concerts, I'm taking Ayurveda to corporates. I'm doing things that haven't been done before. You get weddings. I mean, you get that, and what Atish is saying as well, right? He organized a run in BKC at 11 at night, a 7-kilometer run for women's empowerment, and I've done the run and we've collaborated on the run. You get that, hey, you're a 26-year-old running an FMCG business, like, where's your senior? Kahan hai wo, yaar?
There's a big disconnect.
Pehle wo national sales manager aaya, wo 40 saal ka hai, abhi aap aa rahe ho?
The magic is in Ayurveda.
So you get that, and you have to really find a way to get past that. I think as entrepreneurs also, there's this perception from the outside that it's a really cool thing to do. It's fun to start a startup. It's
great to be CEO. I say this at pretty much every podcast. I'm like, it's great to have a card that says CEO.
But it's an emotional roller coaster, to be honest. Every time you get something that doesn't go your way, you kind of just like, what's happening here? I've spent a weekend, and I told someone this last weekend, a friend of ours, Siddharth Durka, that he was like, you're managing everything so well, your fiancée is working with you, she's going to be your wife now, you're working, you're going out, you're managing your wedding, how are you doing all of this? And I was like, I had a weekend where I had something which was a little bit of a setback at work. I got to my room on Friday night. I didn't leave till Monday morning because I was so, annoyed and angry, and maybe I'm doing something wrong. So you constantly have this emotional roller coaster, and
it's very lonely.
And it's very lonely because you're trying to do things that haven't been done before. But I think the best thing for me, and this is something that I would advise anyone who's doing a startup to do, is one, talk to peers. Talk to people in your community. May not be exactly an Ayurveda entrepreneur, although I talk to everyone. Someone who's running a Dabur also, if I get a chance to talk to him, saying, please, aap mujhe sikhao, aap kya kar rahe ho? Atish started maybe 6 months before us, and we share such a good relationship where anytime Uactiv is having an event, no one from my team has to even say, can we ask Atish whether we can place our product? I have so much respect for what Sanvar is doing, because he's been here for 5 years. There's so much for me to learn from him. You guys see so much more of the ecosystem. You meet so many more startups. As long as you talk, whether it's to your peers, to people junior, to people who are running more established business, if you have the conversation, people are willing to help. You just have to reach out, a LinkedIn request, an email. Just have the conversation. Like, maybe there are things that Sanvar has done with government bodies that I really want to do, but I have no context. One conversation can save me 6 months, right?
So we're speaking about startups and growing enterprises and businesses. I think the question is this business sustainable?
So if you look at it as a medium to long-term play, I think there's a lot of money to be made in this space. So when you talk about a business being sustainable, we're basically talking about, is there a potential to make money? Is there a potential to become a sustainable business where you are, you have a strong bottom line, you're driving profits, you're paying back dividends to your investors, and you're sort of past the phase where you're a startup and you're continually burning cash. So I feel like if you look at it from a medium to long term, of course, that there is an immense amount of potential, right? Because coming back to the fact that we're a population of 1.5 billion people, and it has so much untapped potential, whether you look at your rural areas, whether you even look at your urban areas, right? And the driving force behind, our economy being the millennials who are more educated, who have a higher spending power and also want to spend towards their own well-being, right? So whether that's as simple as a gym membership or buying an Ayurveda or a hemp product.
So what I was in fact going to jump in and ask, and leading on to you guys, is it in this space about turning a product into a business? Is that the challenge? Or is it sustainability in operations, sustainability in getting awareness, education, right? Because sometimes it's a trade-off, right? How do you build that through?
At least, I'll tell you what, in our case, so we work with a lot sort of set of farmers, and then that's the, in fact, intent, that you work with a large set of farmers, and they grow the crop, and then you make products from it, basically. And the key thing, in fact, I was happy that validation came through as well, because I was in the Bay Area, and the head of BlackRock was there, and there was a panel on social entrepreneurship and financing that. And thank God she said that in a way, if you model it right enough, or through trial and error and through iterative processes, but if you create that final or a then version of your business model, in a way, you can design that impact and profitability to go hand in glove, in a sense. And that's, we've always suspected that, but I'm happy somebody sort of, they confirm that as well. In my case, it's in my economic interest or in my shareholders' interest for my farmers to be happy, in a sense, or their per capita income to increase year on year, rather than try to sort of squeeze the margins, like maybe in a traditional capitalistic model, it possibly would be. And I think that works very well for us. It's worked well for us so far. And in fact, that creates an oversupply, where I have more demand from farmers to adopt this crop than I currently need, and I think that sort of goes well with us, at least. But we've gotten to that stage after many sort of iterative versions on the business model.
No, I completely agree with both of them, and I think really you have to, I mean, any business is sustainable as long as your kind of objective is to make it sustainable, right? I mean, we saw what was happening in India in 2013, 2014, 2015. The party's over, right? You really got to build a proper business now, and not just say, hey, I have a sugar daddy who will come in after 6 months and fund me forever, right? So I had a very interesting conversation with a family friend who runs a very large Ayurveda business. And my business is slightly different from theirs, because I'm running an Ayurvedic product startup, but it is a products business that follows traditional distribution channels, where every single customer in India is technically your customer, because anyone can buy a product below 200 rupees. So there's a huge black hole which is called marketing, and you can keep throwing money into that black hole without knowing whether anything will come out of it, because 1 crore and 2 crores and 5 crores seems like pittance compared to the large FMCG companies. And so how do you really find your niche in that space? You can't be everything for everyone. And he said, Arjun, think of the low-hanging fruit. What is the low-hanging fruit for you? Can you be in 100,000 stores today like an HUL product is? No, you can't. You don't have the infrastructure to do it. And what are you going to do? Are you going to be able to service those 100,000 stores? Yeah. Are you going to be able to generate the demand of 100,000? No, right? So what is the low-hanging fruit for you? Where is your niche, and how are you able to be the winner in that niche? I mean, I was watching a talk on a flight of Brian Chesky when he came to India, the Airbnb founder, and he said, look, create a great product for 1,000 people that they love, not a good product for 100,000 people. Yeah. Once you create a great product for those 1,000 people and they love it, you will be able to manage them loving it and then them pushing your product on. But trying to be everything for everyone will just cause unsustainability. So yeah, look for the low-hanging fruit, push hard for that low-hanging fruit, and obviously hustle. Like, I mean, whatever way you can get business, whatever way you can push your product, whatever you can, and all of us, as entrepreneurs are always looking for barter deals and barter sponsorships, and Pranav and I have talked about it a lot of time. Every time you have an intro conversation, you sell your big vision, and they were like, yeah, this is the bill that comes to it. And I was like, no, but I just want to give you product. You got to push. You got to really push, got to be thick-skinned, got to hustle, got to work together, and got to make things happen.
So whilst I think the objective is to get the entire market to go your way, if you had to perhaps prioritize between local and global, which one would it be?
I mean, at least I think it depends on readiness of market. Of course, there's another sort of there that do you then work proactively to ready up the market and create this captive demand? But I completely agree to what Arjun said, which is the low-hanging fruit. Because again, in our case, my demand is so much more globally than domestically as of now. With the hemp fabrics, what I'm wearing right now, there's not that level of awareness. And again, it's my job to do that, and we do that. But I understand that while that's critical expenditure for me to make today for the medium to long run, I do need to sort of churn that revenues to begin with, or at least for me to go through a learning curve, so that I can prepare for the larger sort of lakhs of customers I hopefully will come our way, for which my global order sort of helps me prepare for that. At least that's a good mix of both in a sense for us.
I had a conversation very recently with a startup founder who's running a very good startup that had to shut down because of kind of funding issues, and I was just chatting to her about the business, what they did, what went right, what went wrong, just to learn, and she said, look, at the end of the day, your objective is to change the perception of Ayurveda around the world and in India and be everything for everyone. But your low-hanging fruit is where you're getting the orders from that churning the revenue. If it's B2B that's churning the revenue for you, do that. Exactly. Do that till, eventually your B2B can fund your B2C.
So I think that's been our mantra here always, right? B2B needs to augment B2C, throwing. So we keep saying, right? What was that? What is that? Throw peanuts, get monkeys. That's always been the case with B2C in India for a very, very, very long time. Absolutely.
And it's an expensive proposition as well, because you're up against people who have set infrastructures and a lot to spend because this country is very large. And you can't say today that I can build a huge business through a small infrastructure and just sell online, right? For low value products. So you've got to find that way to really push, and to me, just a simple answer to a question, is it local or is it global? It's what sustains you, If local sustains you, go local. If global sustains you, go both. If both sustain you, go both. The other. Absolutely.
Just coming off of what he said, what Arjun said, I feel like balance is really important. And we started off as a B2C app-only business, only to realize that it is not very sustainable, at least to start off with, right? So if you don't want to be a traditional startup where you're just investing crores of money into marketing, when your startup is just sort of getting off the ground, then it's very important to balance your B2C business with, some ongoing revenues. And that's why we pivoted slowly towards servicing corporates and, other businesses who are looking to have these kind of service, have these kind of engagement initiatives for their employees. And I feel that B2B segment of our business has actually led to such fantastic B2C growth for us, right? So it also comes down to how am I really marketing my product? Right? So if you were to look at traditional B2C marketing, where you're putting piles of money into your regular marketing channels, whether it's, you're tapping into paying like your bloggers or influencers, or putting loads of money into your Google and sort of social media marketing activities. But it's important to take a step back and look at, hey, what are the other channels I can use to perhaps market my product that are far more inexpensive and far more sustainable. And I think that's worked really well for us. And today, if you had to ask me what my primary marketing sort of medium would be, I'd say my B2B is my primary marketing medium for my B2C.
You access to those customers who can then translate.
Exactly. It's giving you fantastic accessibility to, a very large database of users. And the great part is you're making money out of it rather than spending money on acquiring.
So I just want to sort of chime in here, just one sort of thing that on this topic. It's what we've sort of come to realize is to not look upon the existing players in the major players in the industry as sort of competition in a way that who I want to disrupt and I want to drive them out of their business. But instead, and at least the way we're looking at it, we could build, for example, textiles. We do yarn, fabric, and apparel. Now, I do sell apparel, which is in competition with the guys. I also sell the fabric too, and then they make their clothes and put it out ahead. But the idea here is that while that's fine for the end consumers for me to sell clothes to as well, but in this case the way we approach it is can I instead work with large industry players to sort of modernize their product offerings in a sense, where where so Arvind and Raymond and all of these guys, where they have they're very well built. In a way, I feel sometimes, why should I try to replicate the entire sort of things that they've got done so well for so many decades? Instead, why don't I sort of...
You can augment it in so many manners for yourself and for them.
Yeah, and that sort of improves, and because that modernizes their product offerings as well, and then that's a good win-win-win for everybody in the whole chain, rather than sort of beat them only.
So moving to maybe a little lighter note on that front, what's the most ridiculous thing somebody said to you about your business? We hear it all the time. We're an early stage incubator, privately run, privately held, probably 5 of them in the country to some extent, and we run it ourselves. So we've been called crazy, we've been called foolhardy, we've been called, well, lots of other words that I sometimes don't like repeating. But what's the craziest thing you've been told about your business?
बेटा पापा अच्छा बिजनेस चला रहा है, उनके साथ काम करो, ये इसमें क्या कर रहे हैं? Seriously, you're wasting your time. Like, you're a nice guy. I'm advising you. Okay, I'm 40 years older than you. Just your dad is doing a good job. Work with him. Yeah. I mean, but that was like in one ear and out the other ear. You know what I mean? It didn't even hurt me. There were other people who said your packaging is shit and all. That hurt me initially.
That's constructive critique though. Yeah.
Yeah, but
you'd rather be honest about that.
Yeah. But this was like, boss, just go work with your dad. Or अच्छा job था यार, क्यों छोड़ा? Why do you leave a private equity job for starting your own business? Yeah.
That's how I get it.
Yeah, a lot of that.
Well, I mean, in our case, just because of the product, in the sense that that we work with, it's the jokes just don't stop in a sense. But in a way, that's a good thing, because I mean, if we don't poke fun at this, then who would? But we've heard some absurd things. We were working on a pilot project on hemp building material, which is sort of still being developed, and we were in Goa. With a very serious architect there, trying to build sort of a sample house, and then, but a very sort of curious question that the son of that architect asked, that if this house actually does catch on fire, will we be sort of stoned in a sense, or will we be happy in a sense, like how the house caught on fire? Which is a bit counterintuitive to, but no, that's not the case.
That's a funny question.
Yeah, and so we do get that.
That's a very curious kid.
And he knows quite a bit as well. But we get those kind of things. There's not so much as a demotivation. That none of, very rarely have we come across.
It's front of mind recall though, right? So it's only going to augment the way people perceive you rather than hinder it in some way, right?
Yes.
But see, the thing is that I feel like as an individual, you are a product of the decisions you make. And you are also a product of the people that you surround yourself with. And I feel like that's very important. So I think one of the biggest setbacks I've had, and it's a ridiculous setback, is the fact that, you know, I'm an American educated kid from South Bombay. You know, hey, you probably come from a very wealthy background. Why do you need our money, or why do you need our support, right? Why don't you just, like, I don't know, go do something that your dad does, or ask him for money and invest his money and just sit on that, on that pile of cash, which is ridiculous. So I feel like that mindset is, stereotypes exist. What you have to do is you just have to find a way to break them, and what more importantly, you have to find a way to sort of gather your own courage to do that, and just keep at it. In terms of the ridiculous things, so a lot of people call us a Tinder for sports, firstly, which is relevant because you're actually meeting people online and connecting with them to do physical activities, right? That's it. The term physical activities. Someone told me sex sells. So physical activity matlab sex. So why don't you just sell sex? Like, I've had people tell me these things, right? When you say, so because I personally,
It's got a bunch of viewers, by the way.
So, when we try to position our product, we don't call ourselves a fitness startup or a sports startup, right? We like to use the term active living, because when you think about fitness per se, or you think about sports per se, that's sort of tunnel vision where we're concerned, right? That's sort of a set mindset. So we like to use active living, and when we say, activities, we say physical activities. So that doesn't mean sex, just so you guys know. That means you engaging in an active lifestyle. So.
And the accent also has something to do with it, right?
I think that's a product of South Bombay to some extent simultaneously too.
You see, the accent has a lot to do with it. Let me tell you another thing, that the accent also sells, okay? So, yeah, that sells.
So, and 1 year ago,
International vibe to what you're trying to do, people buy it.
1 year ago, it was an accent with long hair and hipster
I don't
glasses.
remember that long hair.
You got to create that memorable perception, right? The guy with long hair and the hipster glasses. I remember him and his startup Uactiv.
Yeah, so create that lasting
First impression. First impression is the last impression.
I actually met an investor once, and we were shooting an ad for our product, and we were shooting a wedding scene. So I was in the ad, obviously, because as startups we save costs. So I was one of the Baratis, so I was wearing a kurta, and then I went straight to the investor meeting, and so. Like we were just generally chatting, having a conversation. Whatever. In the middle of the meeting, the investor said, "So you really try to sell your business hard, huh? You're wearing a kurta because you're in Ayurveda." And then I was like, "No, I'm doing this ad." And the investor didn't believe me till the next time or the third time, I was like, "Seriously, I did not come. I'm wearing a shirt today. I did not come in a kurta just to say that I'm an Ayurveda startup. So I'm wearing a kurta and all of that."
Positioning makes the world go around. Perception and positioning.
I mean, lots of times, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but in line of what he's saying, I've showed up to meetings in sneakers, right? Like, I've just finished a workout, and a lot of my meetings actually, believe it or not, a lot of my meetings, okay, don't listen to him, but a lot of my meetings have taken place like, let's go for a run, let's chat about what you're doing, and let's have that kind of environment going that your product really serves. And I feel that's
I don't
important.
think he could say that, but
Yeah, I mean, imagine him. Yeah, exactly.
He's at the cutting edge of fitness. So you'll see shorts that are so tight that you've never seen before. You'll see sneakers that are like really new because the ones that he bought.
What we'll do is we'll have a couple of images in the comments. Links for you guys to partake in this conversation simultaneously too.
Okay, no, let's stop this.
On that note, thank you so much guys once again for being here today. You guys know where to find us. We're at thinqbate.com. We're on all social media channels. If you like this video, please like, share and subscribe. There's going to be a lot more info about each of their products at the bottom of this video. And that's it from Arjun and me. Thank you guys.
Thank you guys.